"Don't you dare throw that man back on the street," Clarissa said, her voice shaking, but loud enough to echo off the marble walls. It was close to midnight in the lobby of the Aurora Crown Hotel in downtown Chicago, and every eye turned toward her. The black janitor with the mop and the tired back who was supposed to stay quiet and invisible. The man at the front desk, Greg, smirked as he held the homeless man's crumpled 20 in his hand like it was trash. "Clarissa, this has nothing to do with you," he said. "This is a luxury property. We don't do charity." The man in the faded coat stared at the floor, his shoes split at the sides, his hands shaking round a worn-out debit card. "I thought I had enough," he whispered. "I didn't know about the deposit. I can pay you the rest tomorrow. I just need a bed." Clarissa looked at him and saw the way his shoulders curled in like he was trying to make himself smaller, like he already expected to hear no. She knew that feeling too well. Before she could talk herself out of it, she stepped closer and pulled 2 folded 20s from her worn wallet. That was milk, eggs, bus fare, and maybe laundry. But right now it was also a door, and she refused to see it slam shut in this man's face. "I'll cover the rest," she said, forcing her hand not to shake as she held the money out. Greg rolled his eyes. "You serious? With your mop money?" A couple of desk workers snickered. Lorraine, who worked nights in bookings, stared at Clarissa like she'd lost her mind. "Girl, you know the rules," Lorraine muttered. "We're not allowed to pay guest bills." "You want to get fired over some stranger?" Clarissa swallowed hard. She had read that line in the employee handbook, bold and underlined, as if it was holy law. But then she looked back at the man's face, the tired eyes, the cracked lips, the way he stood just outside the light, like he didn't belong in it, and something in her refused to back down. "If you're gonna report me, then report me," she said, softer now but firm. "I'm not letting him sleep outside if I can help it." Greg snatched the bills from her fingers, flipped open the cash drawer, and made change without even looking at her. Then he let the coins and crumpled ones fall to the floor on purpose, the sound sharp and cold against the quiet lobby. "You forgot your change, sweetheart," he said, grinding one bill under his shoe. For a second, no one moved. Clarissa's face burned, but she dropped to her knees and picked up each coin, each dirty dollar, one by one. Her back ached, and the marble was cold under her, but her hands were steady. The homeless man watched, ashamed for her, but she gave him a small, tired smile as she stood. "Sometimes we help because someone helped us once," she said, "not because it's easy." Greg tossed the keycard onto the counter. "Room 215, no extras. Don't steal the towels." The man took it like it was made of glass. "Thank you," he whispered. She just nodded and pushed her cleaning cart toward the service elevator, feeling every stare on her back. By the time Clarissa got off the late bus and reached her tiny third-floor apartment on the west side, it was almost 2 in the morning. The building smelled like old grease and laundry soap, but it was home. She slipped off her shoes, her feet sore, her hands raw from bleach. "Mom," a small voice called from the dark. Her 10-year-old son, Terry, padded out in superhero pajamas, rubbing his eyes. "You help somebody again." She sank onto the sunken couch, pulling him close. "Maybe," she said, "might get me in trouble too." Terry rested his head on her shoulder. "Miss Carter at school said we gotta write about a hero," he mumbled. "Can I write about you?" Clarissa gave a tired laugh. "No, baby, pick somebody famous. I'm just a lady with a mop and a bus pass." "Yeah, but you help people," he said. She kissed his forehead and stared at the cracked ceiling. Fear and pride twisted together in her chest as she wondered what tomorrow would bring. In room 215, the man in the faded coat stood just inside the door, not quite believing it had really closed behind him. The soft thunk of the latch sounded like a miracle. The room wasn't the biggest in the hotel, but to him it felt like a palace. With its clean white sheets, soft yellow lamp, and tiny wrapped chocolate on the dresser. He set his torn backpack on the chair with gentle care, like it held pieces of his old life that might still shatter if he moved too fast. Then he pulled off his coat, folded it, even though the fabric was barely holding together, and sank onto the edge of the bed. For a long time, he just sat there, hands pressed flat against the smooth comforter, eyes wet and bright. "Clarissa," he whispered, tasting the name like a prayer. All night, he had been treated like trash, like a problem to move along, but she had looked him in the eye, even when it cost her something real. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a small leather notebook, the last fancy thing he owned from the life he used to have, a life that felt like a dream now. He flipped to a clean page and wrote in careful block letters, "Aurora Crown Hotel, Chicago. Night staff test. Janitor, Clarissa James. Broke rule to help guest. Heart, true." He stared at the words, the ink a little shaky. Underneath he added, "Verdict, pass." Then he closed the notebook and lay back slowly on the bed, staring at the ceiling. 5 years ago, people had said his name in boardrooms, had printed it in business magazines, had worn his brand on their badges. Frederick Langston, owner of the Aurora Crown chain, the man with the big plans and the bigger fall. Now, he was walking his own hallway, hidden in plain sight, moving from property to property, checking if his hotels were what they claimed to be. Tonight, most of them had failed, except for a woman in a faded uniform who spent her last $40 on a stranger. Morning came too soon for Clarissa. Her alarm screamed at 6, and her knees popped when she swung her feet onto the cold floor. She made toast with cheap margarine and instant coffee that tasted like burnt dust, trying to keep her hands from shaking as she thought about the rule she had broken. Terry sat at the table, drawing superheroes with big capes and bigger smiles. "You going to work?" he asked, even though he already knew. "Every day," she said, forcing a grin. On the bus ride back downtown, the city slid past in shades of gray and orange, people bundled up against the wind, all of them rushing somewhere. Clarissa sat with her tote clutched to her chest, praying under her breath. "Lord, I know I did what was right. Please don't let it cost me this job. Not with rent, do?" When she walked in the back door of the hotel, the hallway felt colder than usual. Carts rolled, radios crackled, but eyes slid away when she passed. At the time clock, Lorraine leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "You really showed up," she said, sounding half amazed, half annoyed. "Mr. Whitaker already knows." "You know," Greg told him, "soon as you left." Clarissa's stomach dropped. "Then I'll face it," she said, even though her throat felt tight. She grabbed her cart, but before she could roll it out, Malik, one of the younger front desk clerks, came jogging down the hall. "Miss James," he said, a little out of breath. "Manager wants to see you in conference room B right now." Clarissa wiped her hands on her apron and followed him, each step heavy. The conference room was too bright, the long tables shiny and cold. Mr. Whitaker, the hotel manager, sat at the end with a folder in front of him. Greg leaned against the wall, smirk already in place. "Miss James," Whitaker said, not unkind but not warm. "We have a report that you paid for a guest last night, which is a clear violation of our policy." Clarissa kept her hands at her sides so no one would see them tremble. "Yes, sir," she said. "I did." Greg cut in fast. "She even made a whole scene, sir. Talked back at the desk. I told her the rules. But you know how some folks think they know better." Whitaker raised a hand to quiet him. "We have camera footage, Greg. We don't need your color commentary." He looked back at Clarissa. "You understand, we have these rules because if every staff member starts making their own choices, the whole system falls apart." Clarissa wanted to shout that sometimes the system forgot about people, but instead, she said, "I understand, sir, but I also know what it's like to be turned away when you're trying your best. I just couldn't watch it happen again." Whitaker sighed and opened his mouth like he was about to say the word terminated. The door swung open before he could speak, and the room went strangely still. A man in a navy suit stepped in, clean-shaven, hair brushed back, shoes shining like mirrors. For a second, Clarissa didn't recognize him, but then she saw the eyes, tired but kind, and her heart skipped. Greg straightened so fast he almost tripped. "Can we help you, sir?" he asked, voice suddenly sweet. The man did not look at him. He looked at Clarissa. "Good morning, Miss James," he said. "I'm sorry we're meeting like this." Then he turned to Whitaker. "I'm Frederick Langston, Konar of the Aurora Crown Group, and I was your problem guest in room 215 last night." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Greg's mouth fell open. You looked homeless," Frederick said calmly. "Yes, that was the point." Whitaker pushed back his chair so fast it scraped. "Mr. Langston, I had no idea you were on property. We were not informed. That's because I wanted to see how people are treated when they don't look rich," Frederick said, his voice steady but sharp. He slid into a seat at the table like he owned it, because he did. "I would have been fine sleeping outside. I've done it before. What I wanted to know was how my staff behaved when they thought no one important was watching." He glanced at the folder in front of Whitaker. "May I?" Without waiting, he pulled it closer and flipped it open. "So we're about to fire the only person who passed the test." Greg sputtered. "She broke the rules. I followed them." Frederick leaned back and studied him. "You laughed at a man who had nowhere to go. You dropped your coworker's money on the floor and stepped on it. You treated this lobby like it was your kingdom and everyone else was dirt." He looked to Whitaker. "Is that what you want our brand to stand for?" Whitaker's face went pale. "No, sir. Of course not." Frederick folded his hands. "Good. Then here's what we're going to do. Greg, you're dismissed effective immediately. HR will walk you through the exit process." Greg stared at him. "You can't do that." "I just did," Frederick said. "You're free to find another job where cruelty is part of the uniform." Security stepped in from the hall, and Greg, red-faced and cursing under his breath, was let out. Clarissa stood frozen, her heart banging against her ribs, not sure if she should speak or stay silent. Frederick turned back to her. "Miss James, you broke a rule to keep a man from sleeping on the sidewalk," he said. "You did it, even though it meant you might lose your job. That's the kind of courage I used to dream this place would be built on." Her eyes burned, but she blinked fast. "I wasn't trying to be brave, sir. I just saw someone who needed a door opened. That's what real leadership looks like," he said. "You didn't know who I was. You helped anyway. I can teach people how to check guests in fast. I can't teach what you did." He slid the folder aside and pulled out a fresh sheet of paper from his briefcase. "We've been talking for months about a new program. A way to make sure kindness is not just a word in our ads. I want you to help build it." Clarissa stared at him. "Me? I'm a janitor." "You're more than that," Frederick said. "We want to start something called Human First. Training new hires, listening to stories from staff, fixing the way complaints are handled, making sure people like the man I pretended to be last night don't get treated like trash. I can't lead that from an office, but you can lead it from the floor." Whitaker nodded slowly. "We could bring you in part-time at first," he said, trying to catch up. "Guest relations assistant, maybe, while you still keep some of your regular shifts." Clarissa thought about Terry's worn-out sneakers, about the late bus, about Greg's shoe grinding her money into the ground. Her first instinct was to say no, because big things like this never seemed made for people like her. But then she heard Terry's sleepy voice in her mind. "Can I write about you as my hero?" She raised her chin. "If we're going to do this," she said, "we need to make sure the people in the back halls are heard, not just the ones at the front desk." Frederick smiled. "That's exactly why I'm asking you." By the next week, Clarissa wore the same Navy uniform. But now there was a new badge clipped just above her name. Guest Relations, Human First Program. It was printed in plain black letters. Nothing fancy, but every time she caught sight of it in a window, her chest warmed. Some staff nodded to her with new respect. Others watched from the corner of their eyes, whispering. In the break room, Lorraine slammed her lunch bag on the table. "So now you're management?" she asked, bitterness thick in her voice. "You forget where you came from already." Clarissa sat down across from her, opening her cheap plastic container of leftovers. "I still clean bathrooms," she said quietly. "I still ride the same bus. Only difference is now, I'm trying to make sure no one gets stepped on the way I did." For a second, something soft flickered in Lorraine's eyes, but then it was gone. "We'll see," she muttered. "People talk real sweet till the suits clap for them." That afternoon, Clarissa held her first Human First session in a small meeting room near the laundry area. 15 workers showed up, some curious, some bored, some clearly there only because their supervisors told them to be. She stood at the front, with a stack of simple papers in her hand, heart thudding. "Y'all know me," she began. "I've scrubbed throw up and spilled wine and things we don't even want to name off these floors for 13 years. So I'm not here to preach. I'm here because I know what it feels like to be scared to speak." A few people shifted in their seats. She told them about room 215, but not the part about the man being the boss. She talked about rules that forgot people, about walking home at night feeling small and still choosing to help. "This program is not about fake smiles," she said. "It's about seeing people, the guest who looks rich and the one who doesn't, and each other." Slowly, hands began to rise. A dishwasher named Miguel spoke about a guest who snapped fingers at him like he was a dog. A housekeeper, Jasmine, talked about a man who called her a slur when she knocked to offer turn-down service, and how her old manager had told her, "Some folks are just like that. Let it go." Her voice shook as she spoke, but she kept going. "I went to the bathroom and cried," Jasmine said. "Then I finished the floor like nothing happened, because I need this job." Clarissa's jaw clenched. "That is not okay," she said. "From now on, if you get treated like that, you come to me. We will not just let it go anymore." When the session ended, people lingered instead of rushing out. Malik, who had taken over most of Greg's old shifts but seemed more quiet, came up to her. "You did good," he said. "Felt different in there." Clarissa smiled, hope sparking in her chest like a small flame. For the first time, she let herself believe this program might actually change something. Change, however, did not come without a fight. A few weeks later, Clarissa got an email marked urgent from HR. It was a complaint from a longtime guest, a rich man named Prescott, who always booked the top floors and left tiny tips that never matched his giant bills. He said a young housekeeper, Natalia, had acted strange and made him feel unsafe when she knocked to offer fresh towels. His words were slippery but ugly, the kind that could ruin a worker's record without saying anything clear. Clarissa went straight to the security office and watched the hallway footage herself. Natalia stood straight, knocked, waited, and when the door opened, she spoke politely and stepped back. There was no aggressive move, no raised voice, no reason for the fear, he claimed. Clarissa asked Natalia to meet her in the laundry hall. The young woman's hands twisted in her apron as she talked. "I did nothing wrong, Miss James," she said, her accent soft. "He just looked at me like I was dirt. I was scared to breathe." Clarissa put a hand on her arm. "I believe you," she said, "and we're not going to let this go under the rug." She set up a meeting with Prescott and sat across from him in a small conference room with a glass wall. He leaned back in his chair, gold watch shining, mouth pulled into a thin line. "I don't like feeling accused," he started. "I pay good money here." Clarissa folded her hands. "And our staff pay with their bodies and their time," she said calmly. "We watched the tape. Natalia did her job by the book. So I want to understand what really made you feel unsafe. Was it her voice? Her skin? Her accent? For the first time, Prescott looked uncertain. He stared at Clarissa like he was not used to a black woman speaking to him this way in a hotel where he spent thousands of dollars a year. Are you calling me racist? He snapped. I'm telling you what I see, she replied. A hard-working young woman is scared. She'll be fired because a rich guest doesn't like the way she exists in the hallway. That stops now. We will not punish her for your discomfort. His face reddened. Maybe I'll stay somewhere else. Clarissa stood, heart pounding but voice steady. That's your choice, sir. But if you do, know this, we'd rather lose one guest than our whole soul. When he finally left, slamming the door behind him, Clarissa's legs felt weak, but she stayed on her feet. Later, Frederick called. I heard about Prescott, he said. You know we might lose his account. Clarissa looked out the staff window at the busy street. Then at least we lost it standing up, she said. After a long pause, Frederick laughed softly. Remind me again who's supposed to be the boss here. Not everyone liked her courage. A gossip blog soon posted screenshots of Human First complaint forms, with staff names blurred but details still clear enough that workers felt exposed. In the break room, people whispered. They put our pain online now, Miguel said. HR traced the leak to one of the managers, a man who had always thought the program was too soft. He was fired, but the damage was done. Some staff stopped speaking in meetings, afraid their stories would end up on someone's phone. Clarissa stood in front of them in the next session, feeling the weight of their eyes. What happened was wrong, she said. But we don't fix hurt by going quiet. We fix it by holding the right people accountable and still telling the truth. Slowly, one by one, hands rose again. Not as many as before, but enough to keep the flame alive. Soon, the board of the hotel group called Clarissa to the 21st floor, a place she used to enter only to clean carpet stains and water fake plants. Now she walked in wearing a simple blazer over her uniform, her hands a little sweaty but her head held high. Around the long table sat men and women in expensive suits, flipping through folders that held her program's numbers. Our pilot sites show better guest reviews and lower staff turnover, Frederick said, pointing to a chart. But before we roll this out to every property, I wanted you to hear from the person who lives it. Clarissa stood. The view of the city behind the glass windows made her feel like she was in a picture. I'm not here to talk about charts, she said. I'm here to talk about what it feels like to work all night and be treated like you don't count. She told them about Jasmine crying in the bathroom, about Natalia's fear, about the night she almost lost her job because she gave a stranger a bed. You all invest in soft sheets and bright lights, she said. But if people who clean those sheets feel broken, guests can feel that too. Kindness is not just nice, it's smart. People come back to places where they feel like humans, not dollar signs. A board member with silver hair leaned forward. What happens when kindness costs us money? He asked. When a rich guest walks out because we tell him no. Clarissa met his eyes. Then, we trust that more people will walk in because they heard we finally told the truth, she said. He held her gaze for a long moment, then slowly nodded. The vote came a week later. Clarissa waited in the hallway, hands tucked into her pockets, listening to the muffled voices behind the heavy door. When it opened, Frederick stepped out with a small smile. 10-2 in favor, he said. Human First is now a permanent part of Aurora Crown. Full funding. Your own small team. Clarissa swayed, leaning on the wall to steady herself as the news sank in. We did it, she whispered. He shook his head. You did it. I just finally followed your lead. Down in the staff lounge, someone had written on the old whiteboard above the coffee maker in big block letters. If Clarissa can change this place, maybe we can too. Underneath, in smaller handwriting that looked like Lorraine's, someone had added, YES. We can. Clarissa stood staring at it for a long time, her eyes burning in the best way. Months later, the Aurora Crown held its big yearly gala in a glittering ballroom open not just to rich guests and top managers, but also to a group of staff chosen by their peers. Clarissa was one of them. She wore a simple blue dress she'd bought on sale, borrowed earrings from Natalia, and pried like a new coat. The stage lights felt hot on her skin as she stepped up to the microphone, but when she saw Terry in the front row in a little thrift store suit, grinning so hard his cheeks puffed, her fear melted. "I used to clean this floor," she began, and the room hushed. She told the story of room 215 in plain words. How a janitor broke a rule to save someone's night, and found out later he was her boss. "I didn't help him because he was a CEO," she said. "I helped him because he was cold, and I knew that feeling." She spoke about how one small act had opened a crack in a hard old system, and how many hands had pushed that crack wider. When she finished, the whole room stood up and clapped. Not the stiff, polite kind, but the loud, full kind that comes from the gut. After the gala, in the quiet of her small apartment, Clarissa sat on the couch with Terry, both of them in their socks, a bowl of popcorn between them. The TV news showed a clip of her speech, her own voice echoing back to her. Terry rested his head against her arm. "Mom," he said softly, "remember when you said you were just a lady with a mop and a bus pass?" She laughed, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Yeah, baby, I remember." "You were wrong," he said. "You're a leader." She pulled him close and looked at the old room key from 215, now framed on their wall. The city hummed outside, but inside their home there was a deep, warm stillness. Clarissa thought of the man in the coat, the dropped money, the cold marble, the hot light of the stage, the new way the hotel breathed now, and she knew this truth down to her bones. Real power begins the moment you choose kindness for someone who can't pay you back.